Yeah, you might have.
But it lets their personalities out. That's what I said.
Well, their personalities generally are being barnacles.
Are being what?
Barnacles. It's like scraping a barnacle when you have to get up. They're like, oh, no, seriously, you don't want us to move.
Oh, Buttercup, because she's only 6 pounds, she like will curl up you and then like into your coat and you have to carry her around.
Well, unfortunately, Dot's closer to 15 pounds and she likes to lay on me at night. It's like having one of those weighted blankets, which I don't understand why anybody wants. Anyway. No. The thumb means it's official.
There we go.
Thumbs up, all right. Yes.
Right, the thumb
Okay.
means go.
Great. Okay, we're going to get started here. This is the meeting of the Downtown Facility Special Committee. It's March 12th. It's 9:02 a.m. And I want to announce that I'm actually to leave about 10 after 10. I have an appointment at 10:30 I can't miss. So and I know Greg needs to leave a little early too, about the same time. So see if we can't get everything in that period of time. If not, Susan can
I'm here till 11:15.
take over. Okay.
You may be alone.
I suspect you will be. I'll stay with you.
I will feel powerful.
All righty, so we've called the meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda by anybody? Not seeing any of those. Any comments from the public, Jordan? See, we're moving quick. Don't really have a chair's report. I think we'll get right into things unless Susan's got something to add. Can I get somebody to move the minutes approval? Get Rich, second by Ann. Do we need to do a roll call? Because we have Greg out there in Zoom land, so.
He's moving. Where are you going, Greg?
I have a meeting in Watkins, glad for work. I apologize, I can't be there in person.
Okay, just be careful.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Susan Curry,
Yes.
Deb Dawson,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Michael Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar is absent, and Ann Corman.
Yes.
Great. Arel or Terry, if you guys want to come up, you're more than welcome. If you're comfortable there, that's fine too. I wanted to review the Center of Government timeline again, separate from the other timeline we had merged together with the public safety building, to get a perspective of where we are. So I'm here to review the timeline and see if we're staying in time with that.
Okay.
I imagine we'll probably review this timeline more than once, but I figured we're at the beginning here and we'll see where we are. So.
All right, so this is an updated timeline based on just where we are now, and it only includes the center of government. So hopefully you can all see it. So we're currently in the RFQ development and consultant selection phase of the project. And so shortly I will be sharing the RFQ that I've drafted with you. But so basically, give ourselves 3 months. We've already done about, I've worked on the RFQ probably the last month and a half. So I think the RFQ and consultant selection process may be shorter than 3 months, but some of it will depend on respondents. I think I've said before, we're going to put it out for 30 days once it's approved by this group. And if we're not getting enough interest, we may extend the deadline for respondents. So I gave ourselves 3 months, and after that we'll review them. We will either smaller subsection of this group to interview the consultants, or all of you if you'd like. It's a large group. And then we would make selection and then negotiate the fees once we select the consultant as part of the RFQ process, and then award contract. So that 3 months includes all of that. The next phase is legislature and community engagement as part of what we promised before, that we would want to get some input. And from the last meeting, there was discussion about deconstruction and removal process, get some input from key stakeholders in that process as well. Schematic design, 5 months, showing now starting August. I'm hoping that we can start it in July, but I'm being more realistic and showing August for 5 months.
Can you get about 6 inches from your mic, just
Okay.
for the Zoom recording?
Then start with schematic design, 5 months process, and then design development phase, another 5 months, which already takes us to middle of 2025. Construction at this point to start, or construction documents, I'm sorry, would be a 7-month process, end of 2025 into early 2026. Bidding and award, 3 phases. There are a few ways that we can do the procurement for construction, and it could be either public bidding or also best value. My feeling is best value is a better way to go. We can select from qualified contractors. Then public bidding, many times you don't have much choice based on who's the low bidder. But those are things that we can discuss further in the process. Then there's the abatement, which I'm showing here, abatement at deconstruction would be next year, is the resolution that is also before this committee. Construction would then start in early spring of 2026, a 22-month duration. And then commissioning furniture, moving and occupancy would be a 3-month process, which would be in February of 2028. Seems like a long time. And then once we occupy the building, then we would deconstruct the Annex Building C, where Assessment Board of Elections and ITS are. And then we would also do backfilling and renovations in this building and the old jail building to prepare those spaces for those departments that have been selected to occupy those 2 buildings. So that's the timeline. I also included it in the RFQ that we'll see later, also a brief outline, not as extensive as well. Are there any questions?
Anybody have any questions on the timeline? Rich?
Just a format one to a comment, which is spend the extra money and enlarge the font. It's really hard to see, and I think Mike actually had to go over there to see it, but you got the room, for the months and the headings. I would like to see us talk about the deconstruction element as a separate line, because I don't know why we're going to wait till, well, actually, do you have deconstruction in 25?
Yeah,
Yes. That's
So-
that's the
line
light green.
12.
Or is that abatement?
Yeah, well,
What are you
it's
doing in
both.
25? Is it abatement or deconstruction?
It's
It says
both.
both. Number 12.
Why would we not do that in 24 and get the advantage of the parking?
Do what part? The deconstruction or the abatement?
Yeah, certainly on the professional building, if not the Key Bank building. Why are we waiting a year?
Well, that's, the current resolution is indicating that that's what we're going to
Yeah,
do.
I'd like us to talk about that.
Right.
Actually, it's on the agenda, and it'll be, we'll talk
Okay.
just about the deconstruction stuff. I agree, and maybe, since it's so far out, you could blow up just like 24 and 25, because we're not going to focus on those other ones, so we can read those items. Any other comments?
I have a question.
Susan?
You sent this to us already. Have we received this?
Well, I was just about to send
Okay.
it before I was called to the table.
Okay, great.
So I will send it to Jordan.
Thank you, Arel. I
Yeah.
mean, because I'll just blow it up on my computer at home, so, thank you. Yeah, I couldn't see.
Deborah?
Yeah, I'm going to whine. Why do some of these preliminary stages, why does this whole process take so long? I mean, I've never obviously been involved building anything, but 2028? Does it really need to take that long?
We can expedite it, but because we are requesting input, community input, but also working with this committee, we're going to be bringing back, during the design process, a lot of questions to get input from this committee. Most smaller projects, I don't do that, obviously. I just move forward, and so that process, and also what makes it a little more involved is that we have several departments involved. It's the projects I've done in the past, library project, renovations, the health department. It's a single department. So you're only meeting with one group, but now we've got to meet with several departments as we're designing their space. So that takes time to do
Because,
that.
but I'm seeing like 10 months between schematic design and design development. That's almost a year. I wish we could be a little more efficient, I guess.
I mean, this is not the optimistic schedule. I think this is more realistic based on experience that I've had. Health Department project was one from, it's been, 14 years ago, that going into it, I thought it would be a simpler process, but it was very involved, and it took time to get input. I think my goal will be to accelerate this process. I mean, one of the things that I'd like to do, and that I've indicated in the RFQ is that we can do the foundation work ahead of, so once we complete design development, we could put a contract out for foundation work and get that going quickly, so that once we complete the full construction documents, we're already, hopefully above the ground. That's something that we can fast track, but at this point, this is a schedule. I know that we can beat this schedule, but I don't want to make promises and an expectation that we're going to, occupy the building much sooner, if that's not the case.
So this is a worst-case scenario?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ann?
Thank you for drawing up the timeline. A couple things. I think I'd like to keep the part where, we get community input, if that can be phased in sooner or later, I'm not sure, but we need to have certain information that we're presenting to the community to get their input on. So not a great chance probably that we can make that more efficient. I do know, like, say for instance, with different projects that come before the IDA, which a couple of us are on, that, there's so much work that comes ahead of time, and then still, we see the part that we see in the community, it still takes a few years. So, and they've done maybe a couple of years work before that. Question about Building C. So 2 questions. First is about Building C. It says in here that that's going to be deconstructed before construction of the new center of government?
No, at the completion and after occupancy of the new center of government, then we would deconstruct the annex Building C.
It says in here on number 12, abatement and deconstruction.
Yeah, that's why the challenge is if you...
Would it be Building C is not in there?
Well, now, if I scroll over to the right, you will see that I've got 2 bars. The initial bar there. Oh,
there's another bar for that?
Yeah, that first bar there is for
the first 2.
and the Ithaca Professional Building. There's one in 2028,
okay.
Which is for, hold on, this one right here.
Oh, that's...
Yeah, that's Building C. So that's...
Oh, okay. So that's...
The orange bar below it that's the occupancy and furniture installation of the new building. Once we occupy it, then we would move forward to deconstruct Building C.
And then somebody mentioned parking. After, say, the professional and the Key Bank building are taken down, I'm not sure for myself that's a priority. So I just want to think about, is it a priority, for the county in the respect of it's going to be a construction site? Is there going to be testing? We need to look at, geothermal, the district geothermal. Is that feasible to easily make that parking in the interim?
We don't know, I guess. Do we?
Around the site, you're saying?
Well, it was talked about if we raise or really
Right.
lower the buildings, but if we raise the buildings, that there could be extra parking in this area for a while. Is that even something feasible that you were looking at?
Yes. I mean, you're saying if we were to deconstruct the existing buildings in the near future, during that, while we're designing it, whether that could be used, yes. I mean, there would be temporary periods where we would do some testing, but those would be brief, a couple of days here, a couple of days there. But yes, that is possible.
Okay, maybe not paved, but
Correct.
hard gravel
We would
or
probably
something.
put something a little not as costly as asphalt, millings. So the airport has millings that they remove off the
Just to spread them
runways,
down.
and then we just roll it once, and it compacts it just enough to hold it pretty firm.
Okay, and that's not going to interfere in anything we need to do
No.
to go forward?
No.
Okay. All right, that's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, I would say haste makes waste, and we ought to be really careful with this project. We know there are 2 major elements here that are going to take a lot of thought. And one is, as Ann mentioned, the geothermal, really the hub idea of being able to provide heating for a group of buildings downtown. And the other, of course, is moving the IT department, in being able to move it, thinking about what underground vaults or conduits or other kinds of things that you're going to need to go between the buildings and things like that that are going to make it accessible and being able to put them in when I'm sure there's all kinds of other water and sewer lines and everything else among the buildings down there. So it's going to take some time, and it ought to. I know there are folks that would like to see this built quickly. We aren't building a pole barn. We're building a 4 or 5 story building. And if we're going to have something that's going to last and be that we can be proud of, we need to put all the thought into it that it takes. And I'm looking very much forward to seeing the draft RFQ, because I'm really concerned that we see what language we're using when we're asking about a potential engineer or architect's understanding of the historic nature of the area and our whole campus downtown and how it fits in. Thanks.
Anybody else? Thanks for doing the timeline, Arel. I think that as we dissect each one of those, we don't want to go too quick, or I agree, but as we look at each one, we should say, okay, well, we can finish that one by such and such a date. Maybe towards the end it moves it months, but I don't see it moving it a whole bunch. It's going to be 4 years or so. I do have issues and questions about demolition of the where the IT is. I know they've expressed interest and concern about the dust that would be created and how that affects their equipment and all those kind of things, so we'll deal with that at some point. And one of the things on parking, right now, of course, we have an empty lot over on Tioga Street that could be parking that would eliminate some of the issues that we're having right now. So that can be in the other facilities. That's their responsibility, and the next meeting we can talk about that, but it's nice to see that move forward. But yes, Deborah?
Yeah, I would note that we have quite a few people now parking in the old bank building parking lot. And so as we move this around like a Rubik's Cube, I guess, we just need to be conscious of the fact that we've got people who have to commute. They don't have another option. And I think we owe it to them to try to be mindful of their parking needs as we go through this process.
Any more comments on the timeline from anybody? Okay, let's move on to the resolution authorizing the removal of the properties located at 30308 North Tioga Street. I know that administration, Lisa, redid that, and will somebody want to move that? Deborah, I guess second.
I'll do it.
Susan seconds. Discussion. Go ahead. I'll let you jump in, Lisa.
So we went back and reviewed the notes and from the last committee and the public input from the last committee and the input of committee members, rather, on the changes that were looked for in this resolution, namely changing the wording from 1 month prior or 1 year prior to construction to the definitive date of February 2025, that the removal process could include a range of methods and not limiting us to any one method of deconstruction, demolition, et cetera, and that in that process, this committee would consider input from our architectural and engineering consultants as well as the committee or community toward that process. So I think those are all of the changes.
And Deborah?
Yeah, to Rich's point, as I read this, it's a final removal to be completed by February 2025. Is there something in here that prevents us from meeting that deadline sooner? I don't see it. I mean, that's just like a drop dead date, so if we
No later than.
if we did it 6 months earlier or something like that, we wouldn't be circumventing anything in this resolution, would we? Okay, I just wanted to be sure I wasn't missing something.
Can I add maybe it's related but opposite question? It looked like in the timeline, this was scheduled to begin right after February 2025. So can we reconcile that?
Well, that's a good point.
I think once we get to that point in discussion, then we can affect the timeline. If we decide that we're going to do it in September, we can modify the timelines. Rich?
I'd feel more comfortable if we expressed our intent here in the resolution, and I would propose an amendment to line 20 after the word buildings to commence now and to be completed. Because that's what we're saying we want to have happen, is that we begin this process immediately.
Can I ask, before I second it, can I ask, could we say with all due speed and no later than?
Or as soon as possible, yeah. Because if I may, do we still have the issue of the city in some way requiring us to have a more fleshed out plan for a building before they're happy with us tearing these down? Because I think that was one of the concerns, wasn't it?
I think that is one of our concerns. And I know that planning, and I think Lisa probably met with the city, and they'd like to see a formalized plan and maybe even allocating funds and those kinds of things before we just start knocking buildings down. But I think that, we have to be sensitive to that, but we have to do what we need to do, right? Mike?
Well, I would second Rich with that minor wording change.
Friendly.
I'm not hearing.
Not friendly to me.
It's not friendly?
No, because I want to hear how it meshes with the timeline Arel put forward. This is confusing to me.
So I'm modifying it to that portion of it. So I think the last time we went over this, it's been probably a couple of months, I indicated the deconstruction can float quite a bit. And so I'm modifying it to, based on the resolution that the building would be removed by February, so we would start 6 months prior to that with the whole process. I can move this based on the desire of this committee, but it'll take about 6 months to deconstruct both buildings, to go through the entire process, to abate and inventory, remove, reuse.
So that amendment wasn't friendly, so how do we handle that?
Then you have to make an amendment, second it, and vote on it.
Yeah, we'd have to vote on it as an amendment. Can I just?
Do you want the language of my amendment?
Sure.
So after the word buildings, commencing now and proceeding with all deliberate speed to be completed by. Can you second that, Mike?
I'll second it, but I'm going to also move the language that I suggested.
Oh, I thought that was your language.
No, I put removal of the building with all, to be completed with all due speed by February 20th, 25.
I'm fine with that.
So is that friendly, Veronica?
Now it is.
Okay.
I don't know how this discussion fit in Robert's rules, but it is now to me.
Well, now we discuss the issues that are raised by the amendment, and if I may, my understanding, based on the discussion we had at our last meeting and Arel's timeline with community engagement and input, and the way this is worded, about what methods we might use. I don't know that we can start deconstructing or whatever we end up doing now, because we've kind of committed ourselves to getting input from the community about how best to remove the buildings, which is why we use the word remove. I think I would have trouble voting for an amendment that would direct this process to begin immediately, only because I think we can say we want it to proceed as soon as possible, but we have to wait to get some input and make some decisions about what process we're going to use. So that would be my concern about this amendment, the way it's worded.
Lisa?
Yeah, just speaking to that and to the intent and to some of the conversation at the last meeting. So we had changed that wording to reflect that a lot of the activities could begin now in terms of inventorying what's in the buildings and so forth, with the intention that the actual removal would take place by February, in part due to the fact that we're going to need some of the input of not only the community members, but our architectural engineering firm to make sure that we're complying with state historic preservation requirements. And while these buildings aren't contributing structures in the historic district, we are in the historic district, so there are certain rules and regulations that we need to follow as we remove these buildings. So we just want to make sure that we leave ourselves enough time to gather that input and make sure that we're proceeding correctly.
Rich?
Yeah, I don't see a conflict here. I understand the concern, but if you listen to Susan Holland's comments when she was here, and she'd probably be the principal person representing the community on how this should be done, the range of options. True deconstruction, it's a time function, and the more time, the better you can do. And we can certainly proceed with removing elements from the building in a controlled way with more time, that there would be no dispute by anybody in the community. We can do that tomorrow, so long as the city doesn't issue a stop work order and fight with us about it. And that, I think, is the most responsible way to proceed, where at the end of the deconstruction, we're taking the least amount possible to the landfill at a reasonable cost. So I think we want to express our intent here that we want to go, and we want to do effective deconstruction carefully.
Veronica?
Could someone just clarify procedurally what is on the table being debated right now and with what wording?
We don't have an amendment on the floor.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we do.
Well, we have it moved, yeah, we did.
It was seconded? It was moved
Yeah,
and seconded?
Mike seconded
Mike's?
it. I guess maybe.
Rich's is on the floor? Which one is on the floor?
Rich's is on the floor.
And can someone clarify the wording of that?
My wording was commencing now with all deliberate speed to be completed by.
What, and so that's the amendment, and Mike seconded it and did not try to amend it?
Because he adopted the language I wanted.
Okay.
So I'm unclear now. So what language, so we're using the language Mike used or the language Rich? I'm not sure how the legality of all this is.
Combination.
It's a combination of both Rich's and Mike's language right now. They put it together, and then once they put it together, they moved and seconded it.
With final removal of the buildings commencing now and
With all deliberate
and
speed.
proceed with all due deliberate speed to be completed by February 2025.
Deborah?
I guess I would feel better about this if it said with removal of the buildings to be completed and final removal, or to be commenced, et cetera, and final removal to be completed by February 2025. I don't know. It just final removal sounds like we're going to go out there and bulldoze it tomorrow.
Right?
I'm fine with that.
Katie first?
I see Katie's got a comment.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify, Megan McDonald and I attended a meeting that Historic Ithaca put together with the State Office of Historic Preservation for us to better understand the kind of what they were concerned about with taking down the buildings. And they explained to us that they have a role in any kind of funding requests that might go through congressional earmarks or other types of funding, any kind of federal or state permit requirements they need to sign off on. And they explained that if the buildings were taken down before we understood the nature of those requests, they wouldn't be able to comment, which could result in not getting funding or permitting. So I just wanted you to understand that's what Lisa was kind of getting at with her statements, but that's what we learned from the regional director of SHPO.
The problem we got with Freeze Road
But
Bridge.
they're non-contributing. Do we think this is a real thing, Katie?
They indicated it was. Historic Ithaca had already shared the Monroe balancing test and our seeker forms and all the background information, so they knew the nature of the buildings being discussed.
Did SHPO give us any timeline when they might actually give us help with an answer?
Well, they basically asked if, for example, if we had all of our funding elements in place. And I said, no, we're waiting to get a building design and an architect on board to be able to figure out the exact costs and, you know, what we would be needing for funding and where that might come from. And until we know what permits we might need from the state or federal level and any kind of funding, we don't know the answer to that question yet. But it sounds like once an architect and engineer can take a look at that and advise us, then we can work with them to make sure that we're doing things in a way that they are happy to sign off on, and they can give us the thumbs up that we might need for funding or approvals.
Greg?
Yeah, thanks. Do they care just about the exterior of the building, or do they care about the interior of the building too? Because this wouldn't preclude us from potentially taking things out of the inside and not touching the exterior of the structure, which for most historic preservation of non-contributing buildings is typically okay, you know, modifying the interior. So I guess that would be a question. And then one, I guess I would just maybe express a little frustration because it feels like there's a little bit of slow trickle information and like new pieces being added to the conversation. And I guess I would prefer to maybe have that all packaged together by administration or whomever's leading this charge to give that information up front rather than while we're in the middle of a motion to amend the resolution. But I appreciate the information, Katie, so thank you.
I think this falls under don't shoot the messenger. We took the meeting.
Not shooting the messenger or anything. It just feels like it's just like a giant onion and we keep getting new layers.
Yes, Megan.
Thank you. One thing I also wanted to clarify was that although the buildings are not considered contributing to the local historic district, that district, you know, is defined with like, you know, a period, a time of significance, and that doesn't mean that the buildings can't be significant in a different way. And so I think that's what the State Historic Preservation Office is also getting at, that normally when government, you know, permits, funds, actions are affecting a building 50 years or older, it's reviewed, and these buildings both meet that age criteria for their, you know, kind of consultation as well. And in regards to, I think the SHPO stands ready to help us as soon as we're ready to consult, and that's where having our design team that's experienced with working with these issues to help could benefit us.
Katie?
Just to reply to Greg's earlier question about the interior of the building, they did seem to indicate that there might be a requirement to inventory the interior of the building to document its historic nature. So I don't think we can make a blanket assumption that the interior wouldn't be considered important.
Rich?
Yeah, Lisa, I echo Greg's concern that we should have known about this a while ago. This is pretty relevant, and having seen New York State sit on their hands on projects for years, we could be completely thrown off by this. I really think we need to have some full and frank communications with New York State to find out what's their intent here. These buildings are ready to go. There is no great historic value here. I say that as a past president of Historic Ithaca. I believe in historic preservation. This isn't it. This is just delay. And if we let New York State run this the way they typically run things, that chart that Orel just shared with us is nonsense. That's my fear. I think we need to push very hard here. Thanks.
Mike, did you have a comment?
You're getting back to when you called on me several people before. Yes. First of all, we're not made of money. Deconstruction here, we know there are lots of different ways you can deconstruct. We've been educated about that. We did a pretty good job with it for the dental building. We aren't going to cut these buildings up and send out quarters of them to be rebuilt somewhere else. That's not what we're talking about, unless I'm fully misunderstanding this whole thing. We can spin our wheels talking about what deconstruction is, what it isn't, what we ought to be doing, what we should be doing. We can spend a whole lot of money on that. We can spend money trying to keep these buildings safe and going, and nothing more than a blackboard for graffiti for the next year or so. Or we can proceed the way we had planned to, going back to the original resolution to deconstruct the legal building in the F&I committee. We expected to proceed with that right after the leases were up, and the leases are up now. We need to get these down. We aren't going to bulldoze them. We're going to be careful with it. But boy, I'm not in favor of spending a whole lot of money. And as to SHPO, Rich is right. All you got to look at is the Red Mill Bridge project in Dryden and the Freeze Road Bridge project in Dryden, if you want to see what delay is about with SHPO.
Greg?
Sorry, I'm trying to manage my mute button. Was this meeting with SHPO initiated by Historic Ithaca or by
us,
the county?
Historic Ithaca.
Okay, so is Historic Ithaca trying to assist us in the process of these, or like be a true partner, or be more of a roadblock in this process?
It honestly felt like more of a true partner to me. They're concerned that we don't fully understand the ramifications of this in terms of funding and permitting. And they were trying to have us understand from the state regulators what that looked like. So I truly do believe it was meant as a good partnership.
Okay, I just want to understand the intent. And then my next question is, what state or federal permits will we need that they could potentially hold up? Obviously, congressionally directed funding. I don't see the state really giving us any funding other than shifting costs back down to the county. But what is it really at risk? What's really at risk of being held up in this specific project? I guess would be a question for either Elisa or Rel or Katie, some combination there of the three.
what they mentioned in the meeting was, for example, a speedies permit, so the stormwater runoff permit, NYSERDA funding of the idea of a geothermal system if they put state money into it. Apparently, all of these entities have a form that SHPO has to sign off on, and if they don't sign off on it, it can mean that the funding or the approvals don't happen.
Can we clarify who SHPO, who that is or what that is?
State Historic Preservation something or other.
Oh, so it's an entity, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Mike?
So, Katie, if we've already taken down the 2 buildings, you think SHPO will retaliate against us?
No, what they said is if we take down the buildings and we don't need permits or money to do that, but then we do need permits or money to build the new building, that would be considered segmentation. And they then wouldn't be able to sign off on the new building funding or permit question, because they wouldn't have had a chance to inventory or, look at closely the 2 buildings. And I will say that we did learn that Historic Ithaca is playing a role in, some of the things going on with the former leasee in the building, kind of trying to be a kind of middle person to make sure that some of those materials are recovered. And they also had already started some of this, I don't know, there's some form required. There's a form they fill out to make it official for the inventorying of the interior of at least one of those buildings. So they are trying to take steps proactively that actually will protect us, but I don't know that it's quite there yet. And so I raised this because the idea of starting immediately could cause some problems in that realm.
Sounds like segmentation to me means retaliation.
Or withholding.
Any?
I know each person can have their opinion, but I'm going to ask it anyway, if we can just try and think of that this Historic Ithaca and SHPO they're trying to help us and work together. So I'd just like people to be thinking about what they're saying here. Maybe thinking it, but thinking about what you're saying here on record. That I would presume that we need to, it sounds like from what I'm hearing is that I hate to slow things down again, but I think maybe taking a look and talking to Historic Ithaca, seeing what we need to find out from the State Historic Preservation Office or wherever we need to do that, whether it's, a little meeting with a couple of different key departments and community stakeholders, because we want to expedite things now, and I hear the frustration. Things go really slow, and I went back and watched, the meetings, the press meetings of this committee. It's hard. It's hard to move things along, and I see some frustration in that. But if there's a possibility we're shooting ourselves in the foot later, then I think it's a time where maybe we should just regroup again and get some more information before we pass this resolution.
Deborah?
Yeah, I'm probably the least patient person in this room, possibly the least patient person on the legislature, but I think under all the circumstances, this resolution, the way it was presented, doesn't restrict us from starting this process or stages of this process whenever we want to, as long as we finish the process by February of 2025, 2025. So that said, given all these other factors that are being introduced and things that we may stumble over that we don't even know exist right at the moment, we ought to leave things the way they are. So I'm afraid I'm not going to vote for your proposal. Thank you.
Rich?
All that taken, I think we still should express our intent, recognizing that New York State may derail us and we'll have to revisit it. But I would like to be clear on what we're trying to do here, which is to proceed and to send a clear message to our community, New York State, Historic Ithaca, that we need their help. We need to go. It's so easy to sit on our hands as well here. You know, and you're absolutely right. We can hold different opinions about intent, but there is a long history of these state agencies doing nothing for very long periods of time. And if we're looking out for the taxpayers here, every year of delay costs a lot of money. Construction costs consistently go up. We are going to have larger holding carrying costs to get to the point we can actually do the construction. This is real taxpayer impact, and I don't think we should just let it sit. So I won't withdraw the amendment. You know, if it loses, it loses. But I think there's nothing wrong with saying it. Thanks.
Lisa?
I just wanted to respond to the flow of information and how it's been received, and nothing was meant here as a slow trickle of information to this committee. The meeting that took place with SHPO and Historic Ithaca happened between this last committee meeting and this one with the planning department. There was discussion about alluding to the specificity of the SHPO requirements in this resolution, but I felt that the wording as it states now would give us sufficient timing to consult with our architects and with the community, including Historic Ithaca, to make sure that those requirements were met. So I just wanted, again, to urge you not to shoot the messenger in the planning department, and it was my determination to present this resolution as it was stated, thinking that we could meet those requirements within the timeline stated, and that this was consistent with the timeline that was expressed at the last committee meeting.
I just want to make sure, Lisa, you're saying that this resolution, you think that we can get all this stuff taken care of if we pass this resolution? Or that's the hope?
That's certainly the hope.
Okay.
And that's the intent, that we could start these discussions as soon as possible, and also find an architecture and engineering firm that can help guide us through to make sure that we are meeting these requirements with SHPO.
Thank you. I mean, that was my question, is I wanted to hear from Lisa and Aurel about that. Thank you.
You know, I think that when this process started, we've always focused on doing the right thing. So the input from Historic Ithaca or this other entity, it is what it is. I struggle with having an outside entity in those buildings telling us what to do with the stuff. I mean, I don't like anybody having access to those buildings other than county employees. That's just my opinion on that. I think that the resolution as it is, and I'm unclear exactly, the word now doesn't work for me. That's the only word that doesn't work for what you're saying. But we have to check the boxes. There may be abatement things that need to be done, which could be done now, right? I mean, that process could be done fairly quickly and probably should be. There's some things that we can do. There's things in there that we can be taken out of there. So I do think there's some steps that we can do. So I don't see how another government entity can tell us we can't do something inside our own buildings. I struggle with that. But I'm concerned about the financing of this project, and maybe that's a whole separate discussion. on, are there grants available? Is there any funding? Is there any, and can any of these conversations related to the historic boxes we need to check, is that going to be an impact potentially on any funding we may or may not get? So that would be something I'd like to understand better. So could you read the resolution with the amendment that is on the table right now? I'm unclear exactly what the language with the amendment.
After the word,
But Mike made it, and I'm unclear because Mike added another amendment.
No,
So I'm confused on where we are.
Rich incorporated my wording into his amendment, so there's only one amendment, but go ahead, Rich.
on line 20, after the word buildings, commencing now and proceeding with all deliberate speed to be completed by.
Okay, should any other comment before we vote?
Voting on the amendment.
Voting on the amendment. Yep. So roll call, Jordan?
Randy Brown,
No.
Susan Curry,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
No.
Rich John,
Yes.
Michael Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yeah, yes.
Ann Corman.
No.
Motion passes.
5-3, okay. All right, so now are we voting on the full resolution with that? Is that how we're doing that, right? Somebody want, and we already moved the original resolution. So can we,
Yes.
can we have a vote on the full resolution?
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Susan Curry,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Michael Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Ann Corman.
Yes.
Rich?
As a follow-up, this seems like a circumstance where Leah Webb and Anna Kellis should be encouraged to be on board, to be aware of this, and to be ready to help us, because they probably are the only leverage we have with New York State.
Any other comments? Okay, let's move on to the next item. And it's the discussion on the RFQ.
Okay, let me, hopefully, oops.
Mike, you want to jump in?
I'm just looking for, you're going to present to us then?
Yes.
I dropped my hand.
Yeah, and Jordan should have sent you that document as well, but I'll bring it up here. I'll share the screen. The Word document. Documents open, so I'm trying to find the right one. Okay. So this is a draft. It's the request for qualifications, Tompkins County Center of Government project. Table of contents, so we announced the project, interface documents, instructions to the respondents, scope of services, the schedule, the required information and format for submittal of the proposals, the selection criteria, selection process, and then the general terms and conditions. And then these are all the attachments that the respondents would have to include. This is just the project announcement. I'm showing a date here, and so this, you'll see this a little later in the projected schedule of April 29th. It could be sooner, but basically based on input that you would provide over the coming week or weeks, that would determine when we would request respondents. We would give them a month to do that. So I was hoping by March 29th that we would issue it or put it out. This is the interface document, who the project manager is, myself, and then purchasing, who we were dealing with in purchasing. And really, this is a lot of just the upfront boilerplate things. And this is really the scope of services. Let me try to zoom this in.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, it's the only thing is that
Yeah, somebody,
I can't move the
somebody
screen.
can move that up to the top, I think.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, so the scope of service is really the statement of the project, that we're seeking interest from credentialed qualified consultants for architectural and, consulting services for the downtown office facility located at 300-308. And it's based on a study that was completed. There's a little lag here. Completed the space studies that we did with Holt. So that describes that, and it basically describes what departments will be occupying the center of government, what buildings will be vacated, that we're basically our attempt to move departments out of existing buildings, but also out of leased space. And so the third paragraph right there is potential departments that will be included are the ones that were approved by the resolution last month. So all the departments except for planning, sustainability, ITCTC, and assigned counsel would be going into the center of government. The others would be going into this building and the old jail. Then we go into the space.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Just back up a little bit. The remaining county departments not located in the new facility, so that means just the ones listed above?
Correct.
Okay, not other departments like whole health or mental health? Okay, so I'm just wondering, do we need clarification on that in that sentence?
Well, the paragraph where it says the project is based, that includes all of the departments, right? Lower part of this paragraph shows all the departments. And then so of all of those, in the next paragraph, we show the ones that were going to the new buildings. And then the following paragraph, we're saying the ones that remain would be going into, I can include which departments those are.
I'm just wondering, is there, and maybe it is clear, but I'm just wondering, is that perfectly clear in that sentence that we're not referring to any other, because it just says remaining departments.
What I can include is
The remaining departments listed above?
Departments not in the second paragraph that says potential county departments considered to occupy the new facility. Then everything else, the remaining ones, don't move into the new facility.
But it's well, it says they'll be located at the old jail or Daniel D. Tompkins building.
What I can do is put
or
those,
remain in their current space.
I can spell out which departments those are. I think that'll make it easier. So I will just include the departments that will be either located or relocated in the existing buildings, which are the ones that I mentioned: planning, sustainability, ITCTC, and assigned counsel. So I will do that.
Okay, thank you.
That might be a little confusing. And then the paragraph after that is basically that we're anticipating approximately 55,000 square foot gross building, and that then we would basically make renovations to the existing buildings before we relocate the departments that we just mentioned. So basically the old jail and Daniel D. Tompkins buildings. And then the proposed budget is the 30 to 35 million. That includes all of the work, not just the center of government, but basically then renovating the two buildings as well, the old jail and this building. So it includes all of that, and that's total project cost. So consultants and construction, furniture, everything. And then this next paragraph is that this county site is locally and nationally designated as DeWitt Park Historic District. The extant buildings expected to be deconstructed were not built during the period of significance which is 1829-30 of the district. However, several adjacent and nearby structures have notable historic significance and possess a great variety of form and massing, scale, material features, and details. This site is prominently located at the edge of the central core of downtown Ithaca and shares its locale with many social, religious, commercial, government, cultural buildings and sites. The site also sits adjacent to Dewey Park. And then this is where we've talked before about the experience that we're seeking from our consultants, that they should have demonstrated experience in the design of new buildings and renovation of existing buildings in historic districts and historic contexts, including familiarity with local and national guidelines for such consultation with local resources such as Historic Ithaca, Ithaca Landmarks Preservation Commission, et cetera, and if necessary, what we were just talking about, the SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office, is expected. So during the interview process, actually during their proposal, we want to see that experience, that they basically show that they have experience either through actual projects that they've worked on, but also we can ask them that during the interview process.
Mike, did you have a comment? Or?
Yeah, in that paragraph, Rel, that's, I think, a really critical thing. And I don't think we should say they demonstrate familiarity. I think they demonstrate strong experience with, just as you used the language just now. And also, I think it should be, we're looking for qualifications where they have actually created or designed buildings that have historic elements or you haven't used the language here about our historic campus area, which I think it needs to somehow talk about the fact that these folks would need to understand that it's got to be a structure that works well or with our other, you've mentioned the other historic buildings, and there are a lot, like the courthouse, for example. But I just think we really need to get at trying to find a firm or firms to reply that have done something like we're looking for here.
And that will be covered as we progress through the RFQ.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's fine.
Step on your toes there.
No. It's kind of hard to go through this entire document, but I'm trying to focus on the kind of key aspects of it. So we talked about basically the background, historic experience with a lot of these local groups. And then it's the goal of Tompkins County to reduce its carbon footprint and environmental impact of its activities, so that we're asking the consultant team to participate, if they've participated in any sustainable practice, such as but not limited to alternative fuels, recyclable materials, adaptive reuse, or sustainable features at its facilities, please include them for consideration. So we're not only asking them for their experience in doing that, but also what do they have their own facilities that where they basically walk the walk. So that's that. And then we indicate in that next paragraph that the minimum level is a LEED Gold. So that's the updated green building policy that Terry discussed with, it's been, what, a couple of months now?
I thought we talked about them showing us the difference in cost between silver and gold, or was that part of the discussion about justifying that extra step? Maybe not. I know I talked about it, but.
I think that'll come after the RFQ, I think, because we're just looking at this point for the qualifications to then select someone. I think that would be probably more part of when we're looking at the different designs.
Yeah, so once we are in the schematic design phase and do our cost estimates, detailed cost estimates, we can have them do a comparison. Okay, if we went with the LEED Gold, this is what it would be if we went to the silver, or even if we went higher, at a higher level.
Platinum or whatever.
Yeah. So then we indicate that basically the target level is LEED Gold equivalent and meeting the county's newly revised green building policy. So we won't include it here, but those consultants that want to get the work will go and get a copy of the green building policy. Many already are aware of that, to see, because there's more just than the lead goal. It has to do with practices during construction, recycling of materials during construction, all of that. Says, however,
I'm just going to comment that went live on our website, as you might know. So people in the community have already been looking at our building policy.
And then, however, the county has expressed a desire to target net zero emissions achievement for center of government building. The county is undertaking a parallel project study for geothermal heating and cooling of the affected buildings in downtown campus. The consultant project team will interface with the study as it's developed. And so I know Terry reported about that at the last meeting as well. So the plan is that this study will be starting very soon, if not already. And by the time that we have a consultant on board, hopefully we'll be getting some preliminary information which they can use to determine, how this building can tie into a geothermal district. Then we get into the primary goals of the project. So basically, it's some of the things that we've talked about before. The purpose of the Center of Government building to improve citizen and visitor access to governmental services, to provide equitable space for county staff in accordance with our space standards, capture operational space efficiencies in a combined and consolidated purpose-built central facility, to allow for the provision of currently leased space into a county-owned facility, so to bring leased spaces, assigned council office of human rights, the Board of Elections storage machines, and workplace development and Department of Labor to bring those into our county building.
Real, I have to run, so I'm going to ask a couple questions.
Okay.
So will you request of the people submitting their qualifications, show me the last 3 projects you've done?
Oh, yeah. And so, as we go further down, we ask, this is what we need for you to submit. And so it's a lot of information that they need to submit, which includes that. Okay. Projects, very specific, the type of project, the cost, if they were on schedule. Yeah, references, all of that.
And the other thing is, this is a big project. It's going to be hard to find a firm that is minority-owned or women-owned. And I know she put in there about the people responding of who are you working with? There could be subcontractors, those types of things. So all that stuff is covered in there as well.
Yeah, I think I mentioned before, unless it's a very large firm, I anticipate that most respondents will be teams. So you have a primary lead consultant and sub-consultants. And so that would be my expectation, that teams would be submitting, but that you would have a lead consultant leading each team.
Thank you. I got to run.
Rich? Do you want me to take over? Okay, Rich.
Thanks, Susan. This is great. What are you looking for us as a committee to do today with this?
Well, these comments are good, so I've made a few changes. Look through it. These pages that I'm going through are really the key ones. If there are things that you want me to include or exclude, I would like to get that. Once I have that, then my plan is to work with finance and purchasing to get the RFQ out on the street.
You have a deadline for us on the committee to respond to you with our individual comments. When do you want to send this out?
I'd like to send it out the 29th.
So you need our comments well before that, I would assume, so you could respond to them if necessary.
If they're minor, I don't need a lot of time. If they're major, yes.
So.
Did you send this to us?
Yes.
Yeah, we got it this morning.
I think we just got it, yeah.
Yeah. Jordan would have sent it maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I would suggest giving us a date. We work better with dates.
Okay.
Commencing now and proceeding
all deliberate speed.
I like it.
Well, I'd like to get your input. Is 2 weeks sufficient for you to review this?
Yeah.
I'm going to say yes.
So 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today. So that's the 26th.
Okay, I think Ann and then Mike.
I'm wondering about things that were other things that, for instance, our Chief Equity and Diversity Officer could chime in about, to review it, to just make sure that, is there things that we're not thinking about, things, questions. I know we had some issues before with some renderings, and I don't even know all the questions to ask, or to make sure that it's, with a project this big, to make sure that we're looking at being as inclusive and equitable as possible. So if she could review it, if Charlene could review it.
All right, sure.
Mike?
A couple of elements. One that Ann actually raised this issue, and that's bird strikes into glass windows. And just made the news when the owl down in New York City passed away.
Poor Flaco.
Before, I kind of wonder, maybe your department, Arel, might, as they're mowing and other things, keep track of if there are around our existing buildings, particularly human services, for example, or mental health, tall buildings. Are we experiencing a lot of bird strikes and dead birds around the building? I haven't heard of that before, but that might be something we want to think about. The other thing, and everyone's going to think I'm crazy, but they thought we were crazy when we talked about it before.
We already know,
for the
Mike.
human, for the, well, I'm not going to argue. We had lengthy discussions about this when we built the Human Services Building, and that was, should we incorporate elements in that building with respect to earthquakes? We had, at that, some of the legislators at that time actually contacted the Earthquake Institute of Buffalo for comments about that. And they said, yeah, we don't get exactly the same kind of earthquakes that you get in California, but when we get them, and we are liable to have them, the ground moves differently. And there are things that you can do for a building that has to do with the points of intersection of the steel and other things that I'd be interested in hearing the engineers and architects talk a little about that. And I don't think it's, we ended up not doing it with the Human Services Building, and I hope we'll never have an issue with it, but if you watch the films from earthquakes that happen, it is the multi-story apartment buildings and office buildings that collapse. And so I just wanted to say that too.
Well, I can respond. My background, I'm a civil structural engineer, and so the code from '97, when we did the the Human Services Building, has changed. There are seismic requirements for any new construction in New York State, believe it or not. And so,
that's good to know.
That we would follow that, and whether we would want to enhance that, because the code is a minimum standard. But yes, the current code does require seismic design.
Rich?
Just building on what Mike said, I think a future meeting of this committee or meetings should be to try to blue sky and address risk management issues such as earthquakes or flooding, I think, which is a real possibility, particularly with our voting equipment in the basement. Want to make sure that that wasn't going to be an issue. Building security, placement of IT for security, and then just thinking through what could possibly go wrong and have we addressed it properly,
Won't we be discussing that sort of thing when we finally have designs to consider?
I would hope so, yes. Well, I assume that this committee would undertake to do that, but I think that's part of our role.
Okay. Deborah?
So if I could jump ahead and further to Mike's concerns about ending up with something that's congruent with the surrounding historic nature of the community, I'm a little bit confused about the bullet point that says, meld the facility into the context of the district to take advantage of both the historic and non-historic aspects of the neighborhood. I'm not sure I understand what that means, and in my opinion, it doesn't provide sufficient emphasis on our desire to end up with a building design that is congruent with the historic nature of the district. Does anybody else have a problem with that, or is it just me?
I hear you. I think you're right. You know, and I think about when we had language and talked about the Library Place building, and now we see the Library Place building, that I think looked better in the sketches than it looked in actuality, as far as being contributing to the historic nature of the area over there. So I would be glad to see that or hear that tightened up.
Yeah, I think Arel's doing that. You know, I think any architect is going to look at the surrounding area, and if there's non-historic aspects, they're going to take that into account. But I think it's important that we make it clear from the beginning that we don't want to build something that sticks out like a sore thumb. We want to build something that blends with the surrounding buildings, which in this instance is primarily the courthouse and the old jail, both of which I think contribute greatly to the historic nature of the neighborhood.
So nothing like what is there right now.
Right.
Rich.
Nothing like what's there right now.
Rich.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with those comments completely. And this is where I think Historic Ithaca, SHPO, and community members should have tremendous amount of opportunity for input, because we want to build a great building. Where I get very frustrated is with getting rid of what's there now, which really does not have that historical significance.
It's the sore thumb, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Lori.
Yeah, I'd like to request that we reconsider the timeline for changes to the RFQ because one, our purchasing department is down to one person, so we might need a little time to get that out. And I believe it also has to go to legal and compliance. And so if you have your comments back by the 26th, that only gives us 3 days to get that out. And I'm a little concerned about that.
1 week, 10 days, maybe we could be a little faster. I mean, we've already had the advantage of going through it here
Yeah.
and discussing it, so it really shouldn't take that long.
So maybe reduce that to a week. I mean, that should be enough time for us.
Is that enough time for you, Lori?
It'll still be tight, but it'd be better, yeah.
Okay. So that would be, what would be, I don't have a calendar. I'm calendar challenged.
The 19th.
The 19th.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, really the bulk of what you should review are these probably 5 pages.
Yeah.
The initial was some boilerplate. The end is documents and forms that they have to fill out. Insurance certificates.
Standard.
Yeah, just boilerplate stuff that for consultants. But really, this is the meat of your review. So I can hop through some of the other things. It's basically one of the bullet points: improve user experience for those arriving via several intermodal methods of transportation. Provide easy access and dedicated parking to members of the public needing access services. We talked about historic nature. Demonstrate county's leadership in environmental sustainability practices. So these are goals that we're letting them know. Explore opportunities to consider input from community stakeholders regarding best practice for building removal process that may involve a range of methods, which is demolition or salvage, deconstruction, or adaptive reuse of the building structures or elements, existing buildings located on the site for the center of government building. So this is to address the previous discussion regarding deconstruction. Enhance the facility and operational resilience in anticipation of adverse climate-related events. So that's really what Rich was talking about: flooding, seismic, those types of things. And then support and promote the downtown as an attractive, walkable destination for governmental, commercial, social, and cultural activities. And then the last one is create a campus environment with existing adjacent county facilities, main courthouse, old jail, Daniel D. Tompkins building located on the same block. And so that, I think that's been a goal of mine, but also we have several buildings on this block, but it doesn't feel like a campus. And so through improved wayfinding and pavers, things like that, I think we could connect the buildings better and make it easier for the public as they're trying to find their way to the correct building to, address the services that they're looking for. And then the last paragraph there says selected consultant should have experience in the design of municipal government facilities, office, and specialized department programs, space needs analysis, building system lifecycle cost analysis, and project budgets of similar scopes. And then really the purpose is that through this process that we are tending to get proposals and that the county would then select one firm to begin negotiations. These negotiations will lead to formal proposals submitted by the selected firm and forwarded to the Downtown Facility Special Committee for consideration. So this is not a request for proposals, it's a request for qualifications. So basically, we are selecting a team or firm based on their qualifications, which is really very important to this group and to me. And so once we select the team that we feel will do the best job, then we negotiate the fees.
Deborah?
So I'm unfamiliar with this process, and I notice it says that you're going to select one firm, but then you talk about teams. Is there somewhere in this document that clarifies that a team of organizations is qualified to apply as one firm or however?
Yes, and so typically in the past, if it's a large project, they tend to team up, but you have one lead consultant.
Okay.
So, and so that's who submits the proposal, but they have all these sub-consultants. So you're really only dealing with one group, one firm, but it's a team. You might have landscape architects, structural engineers, because the architects may not have in-house engineering firms. But it's so when I say consultants, it could be one firm that has it all, which there are large firms that have that, like Labella out of Rochester has an office here. They have engineers, architects, landscape planners, all sorts of things. Not all firms, architectural especially, have the engineering. So when I say consultant, it could be one firm or it could be a team, but it's represented by a lead consultant.
So how would that work? I mean, if we select one team, is it like a grant where you have a grant recipient who's ultimately responsible for performance, and then they subcontract?
Right. Our agreement or contract would be with the lead firm, and those are subcontractors. It's an easier way to say it. So we're not dealing with the other subconsultants directly. They manage all of those subconsultants.
Okay, thanks. I just didn't understand.
Mike?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think with the RFQ process for the old library site, all the people that submitted were teams.
And then the next is scope of work, basically what we expect from the consultants, site analysis and design, including civil, utilities, grading, drainage, landscape design, environmental review and permitting. A phase one has already been done for both the key bank and the professional building, and a seeker review document also has been completed, but we may, based on the phase one, after reviewing it again, may determine that we may have to do a phase two. So some of the testing that we would want to do well ahead of a deconstruction would be do that. You do some borings to see what's underground, and hopefully we don't find anything. From phase one, there wasn't anything that really jumped out, like a service station or a dry cleaning. Those are the ones that you have to be concerned about. That's what we had when we did the Human Services Annex, Office for the Aging. We had a service, auto service, and so we did have to do a phase two borings. Fortunately, we've found really nothing of concern, but it was also adjacent to the Andre Petroleum site, which was the property when we did the Human Services building. Was a massive soil remediation project there. Fortunately, that did not flow over towards the Human Services Annex, but flowed northwest. So we would do environmental review and permitting, program verification. That's really the space study to verify the program. Regulated building materials survey and abatement design services for the existing buildings to be deconstructed. Those are things that I may either do Sooner than later, I may bring in consultant that we use already for that type of work to do some preliminary work, because before we can do any abatement, we have to know what we have to abate. And based on the age of the two buildings, we know that we'll find, well, we've seen asbestos, we may have lead, obviously, PCBs and caulkings, things like that. And so the earlier that we can do those types of things, the better for us, because there's a lot of it, then it's going to take a lot longer to abate. We found that over at the Baker Dental Building, a lot of asbestos in drywall, and it's only the joint compound. But you have to remove all the drywall to do that. So that's typically, and also we found it in caulkings. So we would do that. We would also have them do building code, including accessibility and energy code analysis, which is a requirement, architectural design, conceptual, schematic, design development, construction contract, which is what we showed in the schedule. Structural, MEP is mechanical, electrical, plumbing, FP is fire protection, including AV and IT that was brought up, and security design. And then explanatory and graphical promotional and educational materials for public and decision makers. So that's basically any presentation materials that we'd share with the committee, with the legislature, the public. They would be responsible for preparing that. Also leading public information engagement sessions. So that's that next phase, once we hire a consultant to engage with the public and the key stakeholders as we discuss deconstruction processes and others. They would prepare cost estimates, furniture selection, signage design, bid documents, and bid administration, enhanced construction administrations. That's basically construction oversight. I don't see the need to do construction management, but typically I've done enhanced construction administration, and then project closeout. And then the next is basically a project schedule. So release the RFQ is March 29th. Which we discussed, receive consultant qualifications by April 29th, give them a month, interview consultants in early May, and then hopefully reach an agreement by June 4th, and award a contract on the 14th, public engagement sections June and July, and schematic design to start July of 2024, and occupancy June of 2028. This is tentative. Actual design schedule will be developed in conjunction with the selected consultant. And then I indicated here as a note at the bottom there, that's the county's intent to separately let contracts for abatement and deconstruction of the existing buildings to be vacated. So KeyBank is a professional building prior to new building construction, and annex building C post new building completion and occupancy. So let them know that our intent is to deconstruct prior to, so we would not have the same contract for new construction to also include the deconstruction. We would be separate contracts for deconstruction of any buildings that are on the sites. And then,
yeah, but I thought that we had something about deconstruction and abatement up in the bullet points and the things that they would be bidding on.
oh yeah, well, yeah.
So is that just like oversight versus the actual process?
Well, they would design if there's, let's say we do encounter a lot of regulated building materials, hazardous building materials, so then we have to do an abatement design. But we don't have to put that out for new construction. We would let it just as an abatement contract.
So they're just doing the survey?
Yeah, they're doing the survey and any necessary design that we would put out as a separate contract, not for a new building. What I was saying is in the past, there's been discussion that we would put out a package. It would be the deconstruction and then new construction. We don't want to do that because then it would have to be back to back. You would deconstruct it, then move into new construction. So the deconstruction would be done prior to any new construction. I mean, sometime prior to. And then this is basically more boilerplate, basically the format, how we want them to submit their proposal, you know, introduction letter, who the team is, so that B right there, it says if submitting as a team, note which team is the prime consultant or lead joint venture partner. So that's basically who we're going to enter into an agreement with.
Okay.
And so it's who that lead consultant is. But they will let us know who their team members are. And then the name of the individual who lead the consulting services team, and then basically why they think they're the most qualified. And then this is basically a list of firm information that we're going to request from them. So if you can, so H is basically identification of major consultants, statement affirming licensing, including lead accreditations, and then also we ask if they've had any litigation, if they've ever been sued. We've only had one in all the 30 years, and it was a minor thing. But and then the project team, we want to get an organizational chart, who the project manager is, and all the other key personnel assigned to the project, with including their resumes. There are specific qualifications for the team members on experience on projects of this type, and all to describe the ability of the principals' firms and staff to work with municipal government agencies in general and experience with Tompkins County project staff in particular. So if they've had experience with Tompkins County, we want to know that. And then so we want this description of qualification experience of respondents, consultants on comparable projects, include brief resumes. So for the sub-consultants, we also want their experience. Then D is we encourage and we welcome and encourage participation of minority and women-owned business enterprises in the county, describe their WMBE involvement of the firm and project team. So we expect to see participation. So that would be, if they didn't have it, that would be probably an item that where we may not consider them if they don't. It should be easy to do that. There are some local MWBEs in Ithaca, but also in the region. And also we want to know other work commitments of the proposed team, and to include percentage full-time commitment each project team member will have to the project. So we want to feel like this is an important project for their team, and that they're going to dedicate a lot of their effort and time to our project. And then prior experience, so I'm trying to just hear, about center of paragraph A, specifically lists similar public and private office building projects that your firm has conducted in Tompkins County within the past 10 years. In addition, provide information on all projects completed with Tompkins County within the past 10 years. Also, include projects which required building in an historic context or district. Provide information as to your firm's ability to finish projects within budget and within the project timelines. References. There's a question about references before. Then we talk about their capabilities. And then D there, I asked for describe current and expected workload for the next 12 months and availability of designated staff to handle the project. And then experience working with county governments, experience in sustainable design and lead projects, integration of flexibility and future technology into proposed design concepts. And then BIM, that's building information modeling files, which we've not done a project like, but it's much easier for as-built drawings that you can document the design and construction of a project. And so if we ever have issues on the maintenance side, we can easily track, pipes and conduit, things in buried walls that is difficult to do now in a lot of our existing buildings. Financial references, which is standard, insurance requirements, which is standard, binders, and the other documents they would have to submit. And then we go through the selection criteria for the proposal. So basically, this is how we would select a consultant to do the work. So basically, their ability to relate to project requirements. And this is really the key part as we review the proposals, but also do the interviews, is do we feel that they really get it, what we're seeking, the approach, all of the things that we've discussed here. And, that's really their opportunity to present themselves and see tell us that they understand what we're trying to achieve here and how that they would accomplish that. Their willingness to accomplish our county objectives and ability to expedite the schedule and communication, creativity, planning, all of that. Firms that experience of similar projects for county and municipal governments and experience record of proposed team, their experience in lead design and sustainability, technical qualifications of key personnel and sub-consultants, track record for completing projects within budget and on schedule, their respondents' proximity, familiarity, or past experience with Tompkins County, their reputation with previous and existing clients, references we require, their financial stability, and firms' ability to meet or exceed applicable policies regarding workforce diversity and inclusion, MWBE, or similar factors. And then this is basically the selection process. We would evaluate and review all the proposals. Selection panel will rank the most qualified consultants numerically in order of preference. At the option of the selection panel, interviews may be held with the firm selected. And so for smaller projects, we make it optional. For this one, I would think we would want to bring them in for an interview. And they would make a 1-hour presentation explaining creative approaches to meet the county's needs. All key personnel will be involved in regular communication with county staff, and at least one principal of the firm shall attend and participate in the presentation. Then we would rank, the top ranked firm would negotiate a scope of services. And then when an agreement is reached on the scope of fee that is fair and reasonable to both parties shall be negotiated. If an agreement is reached that is acceptable, a contract will be executed. If we can't reach an acceptable agreement, then we would terminate negotiations, and then we would go to the second ranked firm. And then the rest is boilerplate. We would use AIA documents, and so these are all the forms that they would complete. So I know that was probably not the most exciting part of this meeting.
What's important?
I had no idea there was so much involved.
I remember this. I remember going through this because we had one contractor for the updated restrooms and then the renovation of the library. So yeah, it was a review. I think Ann, then Mike.
Thank you for all that. So first, just kind of like a point of order in a way that for this and for other committees, I believe we really need time, to adequately review these. So receiving it during the meeting is not ideal, I think, on a routine basis. And I know there's timing and all kinds of things, but so it's not just for you, but this has happened at other committees. I really feel like to give the committee members and other legislators and the community time to review this and give input and think about it. We really need to have these with the agenda, so it's posted. That's also for transparency. So just going forward, because as people said, this is really important. So we need to be transparent and give us time. This is hard. A lot of us have been able to comment, and I'm looking at it on my computer and here, so I'm trying to, kind of digest this. So, and I want to reiterate again, so there's not much in here, it talks about minority and women-owned businesses. So if as soon as possible that can get to Charlene, hopefully she'll have time to give some input, because we do have a strong county DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion policy. So, and I'm just thinking if there's something that, in the future too, that this is kind of melded into these policies, so we don't have to squeeze it in. So maybe that's something that we can look at going forward, that you don't have to see, oh, it's missing, but just kind of bake it into this format. So thank you.
Well, there was a part of it that had that
right
in there. There was a section.
Well, the minority and
women-owned businesses.
Right, I meant to say that
Workforce
that
diversity
part.
and inclusion.
Yeah.
There is one little part.
Yeah.
Yeah, that as part of selection, we
There's a
need to know
section.
what
A couple
the,
places, isn't it?
Yeah. And but I do think it's good to check in with Charlene and just do
Yeah.
it. And then, let's see, who was next? Was it Mike?
3 or 4 small things. Is there something in there about the fact that the legislature has to approve this?
yeah,
I mean,
in our schedule, yes.
something should be there that shows that we approve whoever the person who whatever firm is selected.
Oops, that's not the right.
And the
Now it's gone.
and the RFQ itself, right?
Yeah, in the selection process, it might be more explicit.
Yeah, under, negotiate agreement legislate. Yeah, I can add that during the selection, because it does say that it goes to committee for review and approval, but then I can indicate that it goes to the full legislature. Any consultant that's worked with us knows that, but I can make it obvious.
Will they submit us paper copies of their proposal?
Yes, I know that the finance does it electronically, but we also request a hard copy. It won't be multiple copies. Typically, we ask for 3, but they do send an electronic version as well.
Okay, because some of us would like to have, plus they're pretty.
I know.
Usually.
I miss
have great pictures.
paper copies, yeah.
I've got here, who do we talk to? Here's what happens sometimes. You get a great presentation by some member of the firm who is
Who you never
known
see again.
and you never see that person
Yeah.
again. And is there some way I'd like to have the presentation from the person who's actually going to be on site and the one that you're going to be talking to on a regular basis, because they do have experienced people in their firms that give great presentations, but they're on to the next one. And the last thing I wanted to ask about, and I raised this before, who is going to check out and advise as to whether the utilities in the street are going to have the capacity to accept our building?
They are. Our consultants would work with NYSEG. I've already preliminary had discussions with NYSEG about the project, and so that is their role, when we talked about mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, so the electrical and plumbing engineers would be talking to the municipalities, the NYSEG and others to make sure that there is the capacity for the building.
Yeah, I just am concerned about the water and the sewer, particularly, whether the pipes are big enough out there.
I mean, it's zoned for that, so the municipality should have thought about that, but no, yeah, that's all basic design in the design process that we would work with all of those parties.
But we could, if the city came back and said, oh no, the water pipe isn't big enough or the sewer pipe isn't big enough for this building, then they're going to say, we want the county to tear up the street and replace them.
Deborah, you had a question?
Well, not a question so much as, I appreciate Annie's request that something this meaty be submitted in advance whenever possible, but I also want to say that I very much appreciated the process of going through it here, because, Annie, you may understand a lot of this stuff because of your background in building inspection, but for someone like myself, I would have not understood this nearly as well without Arel's explanations. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And I would just remind everyone that we agreed that we will, now that we have it and we've gone through it, we have it now in our email, and we will read through it and send additional comments and questions by March 19th, is that it? Yeah, okay, because the 29th is the release date. And I'll email Randy to let him know.
This was a lot of work,
Yes.
and you're to be congratulated on it.
Yeah, and I apologize. My intent initially had been to try to get it in the week, but Lisa knows my father underwent surgery last week, so I was away from Tuesday through Saturday. He's doing well. He's 90 years old, but he's doing great.
Glad to hear that.
Any of you that, some of you may remember Jack LaLanne. So he's the Latin version of Jack LaLanne. I'm no kidding. He exercises every day. He jumps on the trampoline twice a day. He's got curly hair, full head of hair, and he's always posture. He's always standing up straight. When I was growing up, we're from Peru, but he would have us sit up straight at the table. And if we were slouching, I have two brothers. He'd have one of the brothers pull our sideburns. So posture is, so he's always, standing up straight. Wears those tight black T-shirts,
Under Armour. Yeah.
and then these black sweats. So he looks like a Latin version of Jack LaLanne. So, but
Except for the curly hair,
Yeah,
which is more
exactly.
Richard Simmons.
Exactly. His goal is to outlive Jack LaLanne. Jack LaLanne almost made it to 100. He turns 91 in August. But Lisa met him many years ago at an award ceremony in Albany, but he's an engineer. He has 4 graduate degrees in engineering, but you wouldn't know it. Talking to him, he talks about health and fitness. That's all he talks about. Exercise. His doctors, when he's with the nurses in the hospital, ask him, do you exercise and all that? And so the key thing that I told the discharge doctor and nurse is make sure you tell him when he can resume exercises, because if you don't, he will start tomorrow. So, but he's doing well.
That's great.
I
had the great benefit of working with Arel on 2 big projects. So this was a great summary of what we went through before. So thank you very much.
And we don't need pictures with the agenda packet next time, but after the meeting, I think we need them, of your dad.
Oh, sure.
And Under Armour, the tight black t-shirt. Are there any additional? Let's see, I'm trying to remember, do we go through reports like Lisa and Lori and?
No.
Okay.
No.
So I think we're done. So I think
It's up to you to adjourn.
we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again. It was a lot of work and.